It started as a casual antiquing trip, something my wife Sarah and I did every few months to find unique pieces for our home. Little did I know that a single mirror would unleash a living nightmare upon us. We came across the ornate golden mirror, tucked away in the back of an estate sale. Instantly captivated by the intricate carvings in the frame, Sarah insisted we buy it, despite the hefty $500 price tag. The grizzled owner warned us about the curse in a thick Slavic accent, but we laughed it off as one of those cheesy sales tactics. Once home, we hung the mirror up in our bedroom, simply admiring its beauty. However, that very night, things took a disturbing turn. I woke up, drenched in sweat, from a night terror, the first of many to come. In the dream, I had looked into the mirror, but instead of my own reflection, I saw myself, sprawled on the ground, bloodied and lifeless, in what looked like a dimly lit alleyway. The following days brought progressively more vivid and alarming visions whenever I gazed at my warped reflection. Each time, the dream revealed gruesome snippets of what appeared to be my own brutal murder, leaving me shaken to the core. I started avoiding the mirror at all costs, even hanging a towel over it while we slept. Sarah thought I was losing my mind when I insisted we get rid of the cursed object. That's when the dreams began tormenting her as well. Just last night, she woke up screaming after witnessing her own body being consumed by flames, the sickly sweet smell of burning flesh seeming to linger in the air. In a panic, I threw a blanket over the mirror, but it only made things worse. The visions began to seep into our waking lives through crawling shadows and faint whispers. Everywhere we went, everywhere we looked, flashes of our own contorted deaths appeared, burned into our mind's eye as if branded by a searing rod. Last week, I finally convinced Sarah that the mirror was to blame. With trembling hands, we wrapped it in a thick, moving blanket, being careful not to let even a sliver of the glass show. We hauled it down to the basement, sealing it behind a solid brick wall as an added precaution. The visions finally stopped, or so we thought. Just when we started to think the horror was over, I was jolted awake by Sarah's bone-chilling screams ringing through the house around 3 a.m. I found her convulsing on the floor, eyes rolled back as she foamed at the mouth. I watched in paralyzed horror as my wife's body contorted unnaturally, her limbs bending at impossible angles while an unearthly wail tore from her lips. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed shadowy tendrils coiling around her ankles, pulling her across the floor. "Sarah! Oh God, Sarah!" I screamed, dropping to her side and cradling her jerking form. Her eyes shot open, pupils contracted to pinpricks as she gasped, "The mirror! It's trying to show me how I'll die." I felt a chill run down my spine. Of course, even sealed away, the cursed mirror's power still lingered. Without thinking, I scooped Sarah into my arms and rushed her to the car, peeling out of the driveway towards the hospital. The entire way, she trembled and whimpered about the visions searing into her mind on a loop, her own mangled corpse amid the smoldering ruins of our home. I tried to reassure her, but my own fears mounted. What unholy force did we unleash with that damned mirror? At the ER, the doctors insisted Sarah was suffering from a bizarre stroke after ruling out seizures and drugs. They could find no physical cause for her harrowing hallucinations, so they pumped her full of sedatives to let her rest. While she slept, I found myself drifting back to that dimly lit alleyway from my earliest visions. This time, it felt all too real, like a waking dream I couldn't escape. I could smell the dank musk of the filthy pavement hear the distant sounds of raucous nightlife. As my eyes traced the grimy brick walls towards the mouth of the alley, a battered metal door creaked open, framing the unmistakable silhouette of a man. He stepped out, something clutched in his hand that glinted dully under the sickly glow of a flickering streetlight. A knife. My breath caught in my throat as the shadowy figure turned, fixing his gaze directly on me with quivering intensity. I tried to run, to move, to scream, but I was paralyzed, a silent witness to my own fate unfolding. Two more figures emerged from the depths of the alley, homeless drifters, by the look of their tattered rags and unkempt hair. Feral grins split their dirt-caked faces as they fanned out to flank their knife-wielding leader. They advanced on my defenseless form, crumpled against the wall, lessening the distance with every agonizing second. Just as the blade began its descent, I snapped back to the hospital waiting room, Sarah's escalating screams shattering the vision. I rushed to her room to find her thrashing wildly as orderlies scrambled to restrain her. "Don't let it take me," she wailed, fixing me with a wild-eyed gaze. "It wants to show me how the fire will kill me." I felt utterly helpless as the doctors sedated her again, her cries fading to whimpers. Collapsing into a chair, I buried my face in my shaking hands as a horrifying realization congealed in my gut. The mirror didn't just show us how we would die. It was going to make those visions a reality. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. How could I, when visions of my own brutal demise loomed around every corner, creeping into my mind's eye like insidious phantoms? Every time I drifted off, I found myself trapped in that dank alleyway again, the grimy walls seeming to close in as those feral drifters inched closer, knives glinting with ill intent. Sarah remained heavily sedated, mercifully free from the torment of her visions for the time being. I could only sit by her bedside, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, while indescribable dread gnawed at my core. What unholy force animated that damned mirror? Some ancient curse unleashed by its original owner centuries ago. A malicious spirit or demon bound to the glass. I shuddered at the thought of the unfathomable evil we had so carelessly welcomed into our home that day at the estate sale. When the first rays of dawn peeked through the window, I finally allowed fatigue to claim me, slumping over in the rigid hospital chair. My sleep was plagued by fevered dreams of towering infernos consuming our home, the roar of the insatiable flames drowning out Sarah's anguished screams as they licked at her. I startled awake in a cold sweat, my wife's name catching in my throat. It took me a disoriented moment to remember we were in the hospital, not trapped in that blazing nightmare. Sarah remained unconscious, her face finally relaxed, thanks to the steady drip of sedatives. I reached out to caress her cheek, searching in vain for any sign that she could hear me, know that I was there for her. The day passed in an agonizing blur. I tried to make sense of it all, to concoct some rational explanation, but nothing could account for the supernatural horror we faced. No matter how archaic or implausible, it seemed some primal curse really did infect that ornate golden mirror. At one point, I must have dozed off again because I opened my eyes to Sarah thrashing wildly, the front of her gown already soaked through with sweat. "Get it off me! Get it off!" she shrieked, her eyes still closed but wild with terror. A nurse rushed in and administered another dose of sedatives, but not before Sarah caught a glimpse of me through her crazed haze. How? How could you let this happen? She rasped between ragged breaths, her voice dripping with a venom I'd never heard from her before. You knew that mirror was evil from the start. Now we're both going to die. We're both going to burn. I could only hold her hand helplessly as the drugs pulled her back under, her words echoing through my mind. She was right. I never should have brought that forsaken object into our lives, no matter how innocuously it had started. The visions persisted, haunting me at every turn. I could no longer tell what was a waking nightmare and what was real. Had I really fled the hospital in a panicked daze last night, driven in a trance-like state back to our home to confront the source of this evil? Were those scuffed shoe prints in the basement, from where I'd clawed at the bricks like a deranged animal? Or were those just feverish delusions brought on by the mirror's torment, its power weighing heavier with each passing hour? I continued my vigil as Sarah teetered between nightmare and sedation, her body racked by convulsive visions that seemed to intensify every time it happened. More than once, I thought I glimpsed those shadowy tendrils coalescing along her limbs before vanishing in a wisp of smoke. Just when I thought the horrors couldn't escalate further, Sarah jolted awake with a piercing cry, staring straight through me with a gaze devoid of recognition. Her eyes had gone black as deepest obsidian, from whites to pupil, two soulless voids boring into me, as if from the depths of perdition itself. From her contorted lips issued forth a guttural voice that could have belonged to no human throat. Daughter of the fire. Daughter of the pyre. The hospital room seemed to drop 20 degrees as an unnatural chill gripped the air. I backed away, frozen in sheer primal terror. Sarah, or whatever unholy force had overridden her consciousness, lurched upright, jerking as if yanked by invisible strings. Cursed to suffer the embrace of cinders, to slake the eternal flame. The inhuman rasp continued, amidst a series of sickening cracks and pops, Sarah's body warping at unnatural angles, like a mass of contorted branches.
Satan unmát thi sơ văng.
Be cast from innocent flesh into thine infernal pyre, bellowed a booming voice from the doorway. A wild-eyed priest stood framed in the entrance, beads of sweat rolling down his ruddy face, while one hand clutched a rosary and the other a flask of holy water. He strode forward without a hint of fear, furiously shaking the rosary and flinging holy water as the possessed Sarah let out a demonic hiss. I could only cower in shock as the two supernatural forces clashed. The priest held firm, chanting in guttural Latin, as the room's temperature seemed to fluctuate wildly between blistering heat and deathly chill. Through it all, that terrible poltergeist inhabiting Sarah continued its garbled threats, the words thick with malice, and the promise of fiery oblivion. The mirror has awakened me from slumber most profound. Soon its curse shall be unbound,